introduce our first speaker, I want to make sure everyone is clear on what domestic violence is. It's best defined as a pattern of abusive and controlling behaviors that one partner uses against another in an intimate relationship. It includes physical, sexual, and verbal abuse, economic coercion, and other intimidating behaviors. While conflict exists in many relationships, domestic violence is less about conflict than it is about the need to control one's partner. Broken bones and blackened eyes may be the most visible signs of domestic violence, but the threats and intimidation that go on behind closed doors help support the violence. Now for our first speaker, Victor Rivas, actor, athlete, activist, and author, has been the national spokesperson for the National Network to End Domestic Violence since 1999. Victor is a community champion for the Verizon Foundation, the first champion to focus on the issue of domestic violence. Women's E! News named Victor as one of the 21 leaders for the 21st century. At the time, he was the second man to ever named so by the organization. And last year, he was honored by Men Stopping Violence for his leadership as a man in the movement to end violence against women and children. A veteran film star of more than 24 movies, Victor may be best known for the roles such as Antonio Banderas' ill-fated brother in The Mask of Zorro, the prison warlord Magic Mike in the cult favorite Blood In, Blood Out, and as Eddie Murphy's sidekick in The Distinguished Gentleman. His TV credits include CSI Miami, Law & Order, Los Angeles, and the role of Jack Reese on the NBC series Life. Victor is also the author of the acclaimed A Private Family Matter, a memoir. You can learn more by visiting Victor's website, victorrivers.com. In the meantime, please have a look.
You crazy! Don't take it out!
Oh, touch my brother again, and I'll kill you.
Yes, it will.
Hey, I thought you were tied up. That's because you're stupid.
Will you stand with me, carnal? Vete sa esquina.
That is exactly what their evil scheme is depending on. In fact, any second now, a huge Latino man's going to burst in pretending he's an outrage hunter.
Igor! What are you doing, my wife?
It's okay, Alice.
My friend, rum and coke.
Don't let anyone else in, please. Thanks.
Did he touch you?
Oh, yeah, I got you rum and coke.
There's the rum and coke, and she can drink it with you.
Pero qué pasa,
¡Ay, cállate la boca! ¡Cállate la boca ahora! ¡Ahora sí!
Okay, detective, lay out your case.
My case?
Yeah, you're a homicide detective. You're making a case. Lay it out for me.
Lay down. Then maybe I'll let you know whether or not you'll end up back in federal prison.
Or in the county morgue. Son, you keep going where you're going, and you're gonna find trouble. Whether it was there to begin with or not. And you would do well to keep my daughter out of it.
Again, I haven't been holding up as much as I want, but I want to tell you something. If you really want, and from tremendous read, and just an unbelievable story of triumph. This is it, A Private Family Matter, and I need you to go out and pick up a copy of it as soon as you can. It's in a bookstore near you right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, my dad, Victor Rivas.
Good morning, buenos dias, bad Spanish. I thought I would begin my remarks today by borrowing a question that comes from a Maasai tribal greeting in Africa. How are the children? Very simply, it's a measure to gauge the health of the community. It's a question that implies that if the children are well, then so too is the rest of the community. You know, I know most of you in this room have probably heard another African saying, and that is that it takes a village to raise a child. And if you've ever thought that it's a little quaint or unrealistic, well, I stand before you today to say that I am that child who was raised and rescued by his village. And the truth is that without citizens in my community who came together and intervened as advocates and angels in my life, I wouldn't be standing here today. But before I get to that story, I do need to clear something up for all of you, just in case. I'm not a woman. Now, that may be stating the obvious, but many times when I tell people that I speak out against domestic violence, they say, yeah, but isn't that strictly a woman's issue? That seems to be the popular misconception, because domestic violence should be everyone's issue. Now, I know a little bit about misconceptions. I was born in Cuba, but I've lived in this country most of my life, and it amazes me that there are those who still want to label and pigeonhole certain sectors of society. One of the reasons that I became an actor was so I could play a wide spectrum of different characters, both good and evil. And even though I'm very proud of my Latino heritage, I wanted to portray people from different walks of life other than my own. And as a matter of fact, when I was getting started as an actor, not to get pigeonholed, I changed my last name from Rivas, to Rivers. So you're probably wondering how that's worked out. Let's see. So far, I've mostly played Latino drug dealers, Latino bank robbers, Latino convicts. Oh, and here's a stretch. I played Zorro's brother. Now, I played a lot of violent individuals on screen, but because in Hollywood, good usually triumphs over evil, they almost always have to kill me off very creatively. In the film Fled, I was shot to death by Lawrence Fishburne. If I wasn't dead enough, I was run over by a motorcycle by his partner. If you saw The Mask of Zorro, you know I had my head cut off and stuffed in a jar. And in The Hulk, well, let's just say I made that green guy very angry. But the beauty of what we do in the movies is that it's make-believe. We have a script to follow and a director to gauge the action and even the violence and yell, cut, when it's over. But to the victims and survivors of domestic violence, family violence, it's not make-believe. That violence, whether it's physical, emotional, sexual, or psychological, that violence, it's real, it's scarring, and sometimes it's deadly. So you're probably asking yourself, you know, what's this movie bad guy doing here talking to you today about this issue, domestic violence and teen dating violence? Well, the reason I speak is because of what happened to some individuals that I know. I speak out because of a woman I know. This woman had come from another country with her husband and 2 young sons, like so many other immigrant families, to pursue a better way of life here in America, only to find herself and her children terrorized by the oppression of domestic violence and child abuse that took place on a level of torture in their home. For 15 years, after giving birth to 3 more children and carrying the burden of cooking, cleaning, childcare, and a full-time job at a factory, this woman also endured the physical, psychological, and spiritual wounding at the hands of her husband, until one day, when she set off on foot to the local laundromat, pulling her family's many loads of laundry behind her with a cart. Well, that woman didn't return home that day. On the way there, she collapsed in the street and was rushed to a hospital where doctors determined that she was so close to death, they told her she was in God's hands. Now, this woman survived her collapse, but when she returned to that house, the domestic violence only increased. I also speak out because of a boy I know. This boy went into his city's police department, and he took off all his clothes in front of a room full of police officers. And as the boy stood there naked, the officers were horrified that this boy's body was covered in bruises, welts, and burns. The boy told the police, "My father's doing this to me, to my siblings, and to my mom." And he said, "Now please, go to my house and arrest him and get him out of there for good." Police said that what they could do was to have the boy sign a formal complaint that would put him in the car, drive him back to the house to talk to the father. The boy said, "You don't seem to understand. If I do that and you don't arrest him, he's going to kill me when you leave." The police said there was nothing more that they could do, that it was a private family matter. Well, the year was 1967, and that boy was me. And that woman who collapsed in the street, that was my mother. That nightmare was life for me, for my siblings, and for my mom. Now, to the outside world, we appeared no different than any other immigrant family trying to make it in this country. My father appeared absolutely normal. He had a great command of English from his schooling in Cuba. He was friendly, he was handsome, he was a real charming guy. But inside our house, behind closed doors, lived a much different person. I don't remember my father ever hugging or kissing my mother. My mother was forbidden to hug or kiss her sons because it might turn us into sissies, according to my father. But what I do remember is him beating her, not only in rage, but with cold, methodical planning, not only with his hands and his feet, but with words and weapons too. And pregnancies didn't stop him. As a child, I was beaten, I was tied up, I was locked in closets, I was hammered, I was burned, just to name a few of the things he did. Now, this was not about a man who had a hard time controlling his temper, you see, because my dad took great care not to hit us on the face or parts of our body that were not covered up by clothing.